The air inside Wembley Stadium pulsed like it was alive. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a physical force, a wall of noise that slammed into every rib cage, rattled every eardrum, and turned the night sky above London into a living, breathing creature sound. 25,000 voices thundered in unison, wave after wave of screams, chants, and rhythmic claps that rolled across the concrete bowl like a storm surge. Spotlights carved through the darkness, beams of white and gold slicing across a sea of raised hands, and in the center of it all stood a man who seemed larger than life itself. Freddie Mercury, drenched in sweat, chest gleaming beneath the floodlights, his trademark white tank top clinging to his skin like armor, his mouth curled into that sly, feline grin, half challenge, half seduction, as he whipped the bottom half of his microphone stand in a circle, then slammed it into the stage like a sword into stone. The roar of the crowd hit again, louder this time, deafening. Wembley shook. The stage vibrated under Freddie's boots. He was the master of this storm, the high priest of rock and roll, and the congregation before him was ready to be led anywhere he pointed. Brian May's guitar still hummed from the last triumphant chords of Radio G-Agar Roger Taylor wiped sweat from his brow behind the fortress of his drum kit, the crash of cymbals still echoing faintly in the rafters. John Deacon stood quiet but steady, his bass strapped low, a silent sentinel to Freddie's theatrics. They had been here before, night after night, city after city, and yet, tonight, something felt different. The air wasn't just charged with music. It was thick with something else. Anticipation. Freddie knew it. He could feel it. He lived for it. He strutted forward, gripping the mic stand and dragging it with him like an extension of his body. His chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. His eyes glittered, not just with the stage lights, but with mischief, dangerous mischief, the kind that made fans in the front row press against the barriers, desperate to catch whatever madness he was about to unleash. Wembley. Freddie's voice cracked through the air like a whip, the word bouncing off the walls of the stadium. The crowd answered with thunderous roar that nearly lifted the roof. Freddie threw his head back, laughed, then held up one hand, silencing them with nothing more than a gesture. It was like watching a magician command an army. "You're beautiful tonight," he purred into the mic, his accent crisp, his tone playful. "But I think you already know that." Cheers erupted again, a wave of sound that hit the stage and came crashing back. Freddie paced in a slow circle, milking the moment, his gaze sweeping across the endless faces, from the front row to the furthest stands where people were still just tiny silhouettes against the glow. He let the silence linger, let the tension coil like a spring. Then, suddenly, his smile shifted, subtly, mischievously. "Now! Listen carefully," he said, dropping his voice low enough that the crowd instinctively leaned forward, as if they could bridge the distance by sheer will. "Tonight isn't just about us. No, no, no. Tonight, Wembley, you're not only going to see Queen." A murmur rippled through the audience. The sound was strange, excitement mixing with confusion, like a massive hive of bees buzzing at once. Freddie tilted his head, pretending to study the crowd's reaction, savoring every heartbeat of suspense. "I brought someone with me," he continued. The words hung heavy in the night air, each syllable falling like a stone into still water. A very special guest. The crowd erupted again, this time not in screams of release, but in sharp, jagged bursts of speculation. Voices clashed in the stands. Who? Another rock legend? A royal? An opera diva? With Freddie, it could be anyone, anything. Brian may glance sideways at him, eyebrows raised. Roger tapped his drumsticks together nervously. Even the band didn't know. Freddie hadn't told them. He had been dropping cryptic hints all week in rehearsals, and now, live in front of 25,000 people, he was setting the trap. "Not yet," Freddie teased, his grin widening as if he could taste the tension. He wagged a finger at the audience. "Not just yet. Patience, darlings. All will be revealed." The crowd groaned in mock frustration, then screamed even louder, begging for more. Freddie laughed again, a sharp, wicked laugh that sliced straight through the noise. And then, just as suddenly as he had stopped, he launched the band into the next number. The piano slammed into the opening chords of Somebody to Love. Freddie's voice soared, raw, electric, gospel-tinged fire filling every corner of Wembley. The tease of the mystery guest hung in the air like smoke, refusing to dissipate, every fan clutching in their chest even as they sang along. The performance had always been a cry for connection, a plea shouted to the heavens, but tonight Freddie sang it differently. There was something heavier in his delivery, a thread of sincerity cutting through the flamboyance. His falsetto hit harder, his growls dug deeper, and when he leaned into the crowd, eyes burning, they swore he wasn't just singing to them. He was singing to someone waiting in the shadows, someone about to step into the light. The audience felt it. They didn't just clap and chant. They leaned forward. They strained to see the wings of the stage, searching for any sign of movement, any silhouette waiting behind the curtain. The tension was unbearable, delicious, maddening. But Freddie didn't give them the reveal. Not yet. He let the song finish, his voice peaking in a furious, heart-wrenching cry, then falling into the last, lingering note. He bowed deeply, sweat dripping from his hair, his chest rising and falling like he'd poured his entire soul into those 4 minutes. And maybe he had. He straightened, blew a kiss to the crowd, then spun away with a grin. The mystery hung there unspoken, like a storm gathered on the horizon. Wembley buzzed with electricity. Freddie Mercury had planted the seed, and now 25,000 people would spend the rest of the night waiting, aching, desperate to see who would emerge when the time finally came. The night had only just begun. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. Backstage at Wembley was always a controlled kind of chaos. Roadies darted like shadows, coiling cables, checking lights, whispering into headsets. The scent of sweat, beer, and electrical heat clung to the air, mixing with a faint tang of smoke from the pyrotechnics. Normally, Queen's crew could run the show blindfolded. Every chord, every lighting cue, every costume change perfectly mapped. But tonight, there was a tension that no one could quite name. It wasn't technical. It wasn't logistical. It was Freddie. He had been different all week. Bloody hell, he's up to something, Roger Taylor muttered between songs, toweling sweat from his face as he leaned over his kit. His blue eyes darted toward the side of the stage, as though he expected someone to leap out at any moment. Brian May, sweat dripping through his long curls, gave a tiny shrug while adjusting his guitar. He hasn't told me either, he admitted. His voice was calm, but his hands were restless, picking a nervous scale across the strings. All I know is he's calling it a reunion, whatever that means. John Deacon, usually the quiet anchor of the band, frowned deeply. Reunion? With who? He doesn't have family here. And if it was another musician, we'd know. The three exchanged looks, then glanced at Freddie, who stood center stage again, prowling like a lion in his white tank top and glittering wristband, holding the crowd in his fist. He had just finished Somebody to Love, and even from backstage the echo of 25,000 voices chanting the chorus still rattled in their bones. Brian leaned closer, lowering his voice. He said it wasn't another rock star. He said he hesitated, as though repeating it might give too much away. He said this person meant more to him than music. Roger let out a disbelieving snort. More than music? That's bloody impossible. Music is his blood. John didn't answer. He just stared at Freddie, who at that moment was laughing wickedly into the mic, whipping the crowd into another frenzy. And yet, in the flashes between his flamboyance, there was something else in Freddie's eyes, something that unsettled John more than anything else. Vulnerability. The rehearsals that week had been stranger still. 3 days earlier, in a cavernous, empty Wembley, Freddie had strutted across the stage during sound check, his voice echoing into the rafters as he belted half-hearted verses, then suddenly stopped. "I've got a surprise for you boys," he'd said, leaning against the piano with that infuriating grin. "A mystery guest." Roger nearly dropped his drumsticks. "A what?" "A guest," Freddie repeated, drawing the word out as if savoring it. "Someone very close to me. Someone you'll meet when the time is right. Is it Diana?" Brian asked, half serious, half joking. "You've been teasing about her for months." Freddie laughed so hard he nearly fell off the piano bench. "Oh, darling, no. Though wouldn't that be delicious? But no, this is different. This person isn't famous. Not in the way you mean. John's brow furrowed. Then who? Freddie's grin softened, almost imperceptibly. He tapped a single note on the piano. High, haunting, sustained. Someone who taught me something no stage could. No spotlight. No crown. The band fell silent. And that was the end of it. Freddie refused to explain further. Now, back in the chaos of Wembley's living, breathing storm, the mystery gnawed at them like a secret none of them were allowed to hold. From the wings, Phoebe, Freddie's trusted assistant, Peter Freestone, stood with his arms crossed, watching the frontman with a mixture of awe and unease. He had asked Freddie earlier, during makeup, who this mystery guest was. Freddie, dabbing eyeliner in the mirror, had only smiled. If I told you, darling, it would ruin everything. You'll see tonight. You'll all see, and it will break you in the most beautiful way. Phoebe hadn't pressed. He knew Freddie well enough to recognize when the man had locked something inside his heart that he refused to let out into the exact moment he chose. On stage, the hints kept coming. After roaring through Tie Your Mother Down, Freddie strutted to the edge of the stage, microphone twirling. You want to know my secret, don't you? He teased the crowd. The answer was a wall of shrieks, whistles, and stomping feet. Freddie threw his head back, laughing, before placing one finger dramatically against his lips. Not yet. Not yet. The crowd groaned, and Freddie grinned even wider. Then, as Brian's guitar struck the first chords of Under Pressure, he turned his head slightly, just enough for the cameras not to catch, and glanced into the wings. His eyes locked on a figure hidden in shadow. He gave the smallest nod. No one in the crowd noticed, but Phoebe did, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Between songs, the band's nerves mounted. Roger leaned in again during a break. I hate this, Bree. He's too quiet about it. He never keeps things from us. Brian shook his head. His curls plastered his face with sweat. Oh no, when Freddie keeps something close, it means it matters. Really matters. John said nothing, but his eyes followed Freddie with an intensity that made Roger uneasy. What if it's something bad? Roger whispered. Brian gave him a sharp look. When has Freddie Mercury ever brought something bad onto a stage? Roger opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't argue. Whatever this was, it was going to matter. Meanwhile, the crowd could feel it too. Every time Freddie leaned into the mic, every time he lingered just a little too long before a song, every time his smile faltered for just a second, it was like oxygen being sucked out of the stadium. The speculation rippled like fire across 25,000 people. Is it Bowie? Is it Elton John? Mick Jagger? Montserrat Cabell? No one knew, and the fact that Freddie's own band didn't know only heightened the suspense. As the lights strobed and the music soared, the whispers behind the curtain became louder, more urgent, more desperate. Crew members glanced at one another nervously, as though they too were waiting for a storm to break. And through it all, Freddie Mercury remained perfectly calm, smiling, teasing, carrying the secret in his chest like a burning coal, a secret he was finally ready to share. By the end of Act Two, Wembley was a powder keg of anticipation. Fans on the floor clung to the barricades, screaming themselves hoarse. The band exchanged tense glances, half in awe, half in fear. The crew fidgeted in the wings. And Freddie? He simply tossed his head back, chest heaving with laughter, and roared into the microphone. Don't go anywhere, darlings. The best is yet to come. The crowd erupted, the sound of 25,000 voices threatening to tear the sky apart. The mystery had consumed them all. The set had been pure fire. One after another, Queen's anthems had rolled like thunder across Wembley. Another one bites the dust. I Want to Break Free, hammer to fall. Freddie was unstoppable, his energy volcanic, his voice cutting through the night air with impossible force. Every time the crowd thought they had peaked, he dragged them higher. But then he stopped. It happened in the middle of the set, just after the blistering end of Crazy Little Thing Called Love. The final chords rang out, Brian's guitar echoing into the night, Roger's cymbals crashing like gunfire. And then silence. Freddie froze in place, microphone still in hand, chest heaving, eyes scanning the audience as though he were suddenly searching for something. 25,000 people, already mid-cheer, faltered. The applause staggered. The screams died down. One by one, voices lowered, hands fell, and the noise collapsed into an uneasy hush. Wembley, an ocean of bodies, sweat, and sound, was suddenly still. Roger glanced toward Brian with alarm. This wasn't the set list. John shifted nervously, plucking a muted string on his bass. Crew members leaned forward in the wings, whispering into headsets. Cameras zoomed in on Freddie, their operators sensing something important was about to unfold. Freddie adjusted the mic stand, sliding it closer. He didn't speak immediately. He let the silence breathe. He let the crowd hang on the precipice. His dark eyes glistened beneath the spotlights, his jaw tight, his body trembling with the weight of words pressing against his chest. Finally he spoke. "My darlings," he began softly, almost too softly for a stadium this size. But the hush was so absolute that even those in the farthest seats felt the words ripple across them. "Tonight is not like other nights." A murmur ran through the stands. Freddie's tone was different, quieter, stripped of flamboyance. This wasn't the cocky ringmaster who strutted with arrogance and fire. This was something else. Something raw. Freddie took a breath, steadying himself, then continued. "You see, I've been keeping a little secret from you. From everyone, really." He paused, gripping the microphone tighter. "For weeks, I've been carrying this in my heart, waiting for this exact moment. And now that it's here, I find myself scared to bloody death." The audience laughed nervously, but it wasn't the usual roar. It was soft, uncertain. They could feel the sincerity dripping from him. Brian stepped forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, as though silently asking, "What are you doing, Fred?" Freddie glanced back at him, then gave the tiniest smile before facing the crowd again. "I want you all to understand something," he said, his voice growing steadier, louder. "There are two Freddie Mercurys. The one you know. The peacock, the strutting fool in tights, the singer with a microphone stand he waves about like a bloody magic wand." He gestured theatrically with the mic pole, drawing a ripple of laughter. "And then there's another one." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The silence deepened. "This other Freddie," he continued, his tone softening again, "has been shaped by people you've never heard of. People who don't stand under lights. People who don't sell records or plaster their faces on posters. People who, without even realizing it, gave me pieces of themselves, pieces I've carried with me every time I walk out onto a stage like this." He looked out at the audience. 25,000 faces, waiting, holding their breath. "Tonight," Freddie said, his voice cracking ever so slightly, "I've brought one of those people here." A collective gasp swept through Wembley. People turned to each other, eyes wide, mouths open. The mystery guest. The rumors. The hints. It was happening. Freddie tightened his grip on the mic. He was no longer pacing, no longer strutting. He stood utterly still, shoulders tense, his every word dripping with vulnerability. "This person," he said slowly, deliberately, "means more to me than music, more than fame, more than all of this." He swept his free hand out, gesturing at the crowd, the lights, the spectacle, "and I've never had the courage to share them with you. Until now." The stadium seemed to inhale as one. Even the night air felt thicker. Roger leaned forward over his kit, whispering to Brian, "Is he actually going to do it?" Brian didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Freddie, and for once the guitarist looked as breathless as the fans. Freddie took a step forward, planting himself at the very lip of the stage. Spotlights followed him, throwing a silhouette across the sea of people. He looked like a man about to step into confession. "I have built my life on performance," he said, his voice echoing through Wembley. "On spectacle. On making you believe in magic, in power, in something bigger than life itself. But what I want to share with you tonight is none of those things. It's not bigger than life. It is life. My life." A woman in the front row covered her mouth, tears welling. Someone shouted, "We love you, Freddie." And the entire stadium echoed the sentiment, a tidal wave of emotion crashing forward. Freddie smiled faintly, but the smile was laced with sadness, too. "This person," he said, pausing as though summoning courage, taught me what it means to feel, to fight, to love, to be human. Without them, there would be no Queen. Without them, there would be no Freddie Mercury. He bowed his head, gripping the microphone like it was the only thing tethering him to stage. The audience was beyond restless now. They were trembling with anticipation. People clutched each other's arms. Fans buried their faces in their hands. Cameras zoomed closer and closer. Freddie lifted his head again, his voice stronger now, almost defiant. So, tonight, Wembley, tonight, I want to share them with you. I want you to meet the person behind the curtain, the person who made this. He swept both arms out wide to encompass the band, the lights, the crowd, the music itself. Possible. The silence was electric, unbearable. You could hear people sobbing. You could hear the rustle of jackets, the faint squeak of someone shifting on a seat 500 rows back. Freddie turned his head toward the wings. He raised one hand, beckoning. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice faltered. He swallowed hard, then spoke again, softer, as though the words themselves weighed more than he could bear. Tonight, you're going to meet my heart. The crowd erupted into gasps, screams, wild applause, but Freddie didn't move. He stood frozen, hand still raised toward the curtain. And just like that, he stopped again. He lowered his hand, smiled faintly. Not yet, he whispered into the mic, his eyes sparkling with wickedness, even to the tears threatening to spill. You'll see them soon. But for now, let's play some bloody music. The crowd screamed in both frustration and ecstasy, the suspense now burning hotter than ever. Brian struck the first chord of Bohemian Rhapsody, and the audience lost their minds. But not a single person forgot what Freddie had just promised. Somewhere backstage, the mystery guests waited in the shadows. And 25,000 people had never been more desperate for the next moment. The opening chords of Bohemian Rhapsody crashed like thunder, and Wembley answered with a roar that shook the sky. Freddie leaned into piano, hammering the keys with wild precision, his voice soaring and then breaking into that signature falsetto that seemed to bend time itself. The crowd sang every word back at him. 25,000 voices turned into one. But beneath the fireworks of the song, everyone felt it, the lingering ghost of his promise. Freddie Mercury had told them there was someone waiting behind the curtain. And now every spotlight, every flicker of smoke, every pause between verses felt like it might be the moment. By the final operatic crescendo, the tension was unbearable. Brian's guitar wailed, Roger's drums pounded like cannon fire, and the crowd threw their entire souls into the "so you think you can stone me and spit in my eye" refrain. When Freddie slammed the last piano chord and leapt to his feet, the ovation nearly broke Wembley in half. And then he held up a hand. Silence felt like a curtain dropping. Freddie stood at the edge of the stage, chest heaving, eyes wet with sweat, and something else, something rawer, heavier. He gripped the microphone, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse, ragged with emotion. Darlings, I think it's time. The stadium erupted in screams. Freddie raised his other hand, palm open, calming them. No, listen. You must really listen to me now. What you're about to see is not for spectacle. It's not for headlines. It's not for Queen, and it's not even for me. He paused, his throat tight. It's for the truth. A single spotlight shifted, illuminating the curtain at stage right. The crowd gasped collectively, thousands of heads snapping toward it, cameras zooming in, flashes popping like fireworks. The curtain quivered. Someone was there. Freddie turned toward it, his hand still trembling as he beckoned. Come on, love, he whispered into the mic. It's time. For a moment, nothing happened. The stadium held its breath. Then the curtain shifted. A silhouette emerged, and 25,000 people screamed. At first, the shape was small, almost fragile, the opposite of the towering spectacle they expected. It wasn't Bowie. It wasn't Elton. It wasn't Jagger or some famous opera diva. It was a woman, plainly dressed in her 60s, her posture stiff with nerves. She wore a simple dark dress, nothing glittering, nothing stage-worthy. Her hair was silver, tied neatly back. She moved slowly, almost shyly, as if each step onto that stage was a step into another world. Freddie's face broke into a smile that was unlike any grin he had flashed all night. It wasn't wicked or mischievous or flamboyant. It was pure, unfiltered, gentle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddie said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I want you to meet the woman who taught me to sing before I could even walk. The woman who gave me music before I knew what music was. My first teacher, my first inspiration, my mother." The gasp that tore through Wembley was deafening. People stared in shock. 25,000 strangers blinked to the sight of her, Jabal, Freddie Mercury's mother, walking onto a stage she never thought she'd set foot on. Some fans sobbed outright. Others clasped their faces in disbelief. The reveal wasn't a celebrity cameo. It was something infinitely more powerful. The woman who had raised him, who had instilled music into his bones, who had been hidden from the spotlight for decades. Freddie rushed forward, his microphone forgotten, and took her hand. He kissed it, then pressed it against his chest. The cameras caught the moment. Freddie Mercury, rock god, bowing his head before a simple woman who carried the weight of his beginnings. "She doesn't perform," Freddie said, his voice thick. "She's never been on a stage like this." But without her, there would be no Freddie Mercury. The crowd erupted into a standing ovation, cheers cascading like a tidal wave. Just smiled nervously, clearly overwhelmed, her small frame shaking. Freddie wrapped his arm around her shoulders, shielding her from the blaze of lights, whispering something in her ear that the microphones couldn't catch. She nodded faintly, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Do you know what she used to do when I was a boy?" Freddie continued, turning back to the crowd. "She would hum lullabies in our little house in Zanzibar. Soft little tunes, Parsi prayers, and I would fall asleep with music already inside me. That music, those songs, are still in me today. Every time you hear me sing, you're hearing her." The audience roared, clapped, and screamed, but many were crying, too. This wasn't the kind of reveal they had expected. It was something far more intimate, something that laid bare Freddie's soul. "Mother," Freddie said softly, turning back to her, "will you sing with me? Just one line, just for them." Her eyes widened. She shook her head quickly, mouthing no, 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 embarrassed. Freddie chuckled and kissed her cheek. "All right, darlings," he told crowd. "She's too shy for that. But let me tell you this. Every note I've ever sung is because of her." He took her hand again, lifting it high into the air. "This is the real mystery guest," he cried, his voice thundering across Wembley. "The one who gave me my soul." The ovation that followed was unlike anything Wembley had ever heard. It wasn't just applause. It was reverence. 25,000 people stood as one, cheering not just for Freddie Mercury, but for the quiet, ordinary woman who had raised him. Jur's eyes shimmered as she looked out at the sea of faces. She leaned closer to Freddie, whispering something that made him laugh, even to the tears glistening on his cheeks. He held her tighter, protecting her from the roar of adoration. Brian May stepped forward, playing a gentle riff, almost like a hymn. Roger tapped the edge of his snare with brushes, soft as a heartbeat. John Deacon laid down a bass line so delicate it was barely audible. Freddie leaned into the mic one more time. "This is not about fame. This is not about Queen. This is about love. Pure love, the kind only a mother can give." He turned to Jill, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." The crowd erupted again, tears flowing freely. Fans holding each other, strangers embracing in awe. Cameras captured every second, etching it into history. For one night, the greatest showman in rock had removed the mask. For one night, Freddie Mercury wasn't a legend. He was just a son, introducing the world to the woman who had given him everything. And 25,000 people would never forget it. For a moment, Wembley wasn't a stadium. It was a living heartbeat. 25,000 people stood on their feet, a tidal wave of applause, and tears rolling over the stage in endless waves. The floodlights that had moments ago been weapons of spectacle now felt softer, warmer, like sunlight pouring down on Freddie and his mother. Jabal stood at the center of the greatest rock stage in the world, clutching her son's hand, like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. She looked small compared to the towering speaker stacks and sprawling light rigs, but in that moment, she was the most important person in the building. Freddie's chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths. He looked out at the sea of faces, then back at his mother, and for the first time that night, his confident mask slipped entirely. He wasn't the peacock, the provocateur, the flamboyant god of rock. He was a son, standing in the light with the woman who had first hummed music into his bones. He leaned into the microphone, his voice low but steady. "You know," he said, "the greatest song I ever heard wasn't written by me. It wasn't written by Brian or Bowie or Lennon or Jagger. It wasn't even written down at all. It was my mother humming me to sleep, a little tune she used to sing when the world felt too big." The audience fell completely silent. Cameras zoomed close. You could hear people sniffing in the stands, wiping their eyes. Freddie turned to Jemima, he whispered. "Just one line. Please. For me." Her lips pressed together nervously. She shook her head again, mouthing no, her silver hair glinting in the spotlight. The crowd began to cheer her on, chanting, "Sing, sing, sing." Freddie chuckled, brushing his mustache with his hand, then leaned down and whispered into her ear. Whatever he said made her laugh, a soft, shy laugh that rippled through the speakers. She looked out at the crowd, swallowed hard, and finally nodded. Freddie clapped his hands, triumphant. "Ladies and gentlemen," he cried, his voice soaring, "my mother's gonna sing to you." The stadium exploded in cheers. Brian, Roger, and John exchanged stunned looks, then quickly adjusted. Brian shifted his guitar strap, fingers finding a delicate progression. Roger picked up brushes instead of sticks, laying a soft rhythm like footsteps on snow. John added a heartbeat pulse, steady and warm. Freddie stepped back, giving to the microphone. She hesitated, trembling as if the weight of 25,000 eyes would crush her. Then she closed her eyes, took a breath, and sang. It wasn't loud, it wasn't polished, but it was pure. A simple lullaby in Gujarati, soft and melodic, the kind of song mothers have sung to children for centuries. The stadium felt utterly still. Even the flashbulbs stopped for a moment, as though time itself had bowed in reverence. When her voice wavered, Freddie joined in, harmonizing gently, his voice blending with hers like it had done when he was a child lying in bed, listening to her voice carry him into dreams. He didn't sing with power or flamboyance. He sang as her son. The effect was overwhelming. People in the crowd sobbed openly. Couples clung to each other. Strangers embraced. 25,000 people felt they had been invited into the most private corner of Freddie's soul. When the lullaby ended, there was no applause at first. Just silence. Thick, reverent silence, as though no one dared to break the spell. Then, slowly, the ovation began. It started with a single cheer, then another, and then it grew into an unstoppable tidal wave. The sound was deafening, shaking the very foundations of Wembley. Freddie hugged his mother tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. Cameras caught the tears streaming down his cheeks, smudging his eyeliner. When he finally pulled back, he kissed her forehead and held her hand high again, presenting her to the crowd like royalty. "This," he shouted over the roar, "is where I came from. This is the truth. This is the only thing that matters." The band launched into We Are the Champions. Freddie didn't sing alone. He stood side by side with his mother, holding her hand in one of his and the microphone in the other. His voice rang out across the night, filled not with flamboyance but with gratitude. The crowd joined in instantly, their voices swelling, until they drowned even the amplifiers. "We are the champions, my friends." The lyrics had never meant more. It wasn't about rock stars or fans anymore. It wasn't about records or fame. It was about endurance, love, family, the quiet strength of the people who shape us when no one is watching. Just smiled through her tears, her free hand pressing against her chest as the anthem shook the sky. She didn't sing now. She didn't need to. She simply stood beside her son, glowing in the adoration of a world that had finally seen the truth behind its brightest star. As the final chorus hit, the crowd became one giant choir. 25,000 voices fused into a single, soaring declaration. Freddie held a microphone out to them, his own voice breaking with emotion as he let the people sing for him. When the last note faded, Freddie fell to his knees before his mother, bowing like a child before a queen. The audience erupted again, the ovation stretching on and on. 10 minutes of unbroken love crashing against the stage like waves. When he finally rose, Freddie whispered into the mic, "Everything good in me began with her. Tonight, you've met the real Freddie Mercury. Not the man in the crown, not the voice, not the showman. The boy who listened to his mother sing." He turned to Jill, kissed her cheek once more, and guided her gently back toward the wings. She moved slowly, overwhelmed but radiant, pausing to wave at the sea of faces that would never forget her. As she disappeared behind the curtain, Freddie lingered at the edge of the stage, watching her go. Then he turned back to the crowd, eyes blazing, chest heaving. "Well, my darlings," he said, his grin finally returning, "how's that for a bloody mystery guest?" The crowd answered with a roar that could have split the heavens. The night wasn't just a concert anymore. It was a revelation, a secret torn open, a moment when the greatest frontman in rock laid down his crown and showed his heart. And everyone there knew they would never, ever see anything like it again. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.